everybody, and welcome back to English for Writing Business Emails. I'm Brian Stewart, and in this video lesson, we're going over Unit 2, Part 2. We're continuing with the idea of common mistakes that Korean business professionals make when they're writing business emails in English. And of course, the intention of this lesson is first to raise awareness of these mistakes, because many people make these mistakes and they may not be aware of them. But I'd like to point those mistakes out to say, hey, be careful, these are common mistakes that people are making. Two, explain why they are mistakes and how to fix them. And three, give people a chance to practice so that they hopefully don't make these mistakes in the future. Of course, it takes some practice, not just from this lesson, but more practice to really rid ourselves of any bad habits we may have picked up when we learn a new language. So I hope that I'm helping you out by pointing out these common mistakes and explaining why they are mistakes and suggesting improvements or how to change those mistakes so that your English level can get better. And of course, I'm always inspired by students when I say in my workshops, you know, a lot of these are just really small mistakes. But many students' reaction is, yeah, we know, but we want to perfect our skill at English. So great, thank you very much. I hope that I can help you. And of course, the information in this video lecture corresponds to the information on pages 16 to 22 in your book, English for Writing Business Emails. If you don't have the book yet and you would like to order a copy, please check out the order information in the video description below this video. Okay, thank you. We're picking up from where we left off in the last video where we went over part 1. There's a lot of material to cover, so I'm dividing this chapter into several different videos. So we left off on page 16, at the start of page 16, and you can see common mistake -5. So I'm grouping different mistakes together as much as I can, and in this section we're looking at words that are commonly misused. In other words, students are using a word when that word doesn't really have the meaning that they intend, and there's another word that should be used instead. And a good example of that, of course, is the difference between notice and notify. Notice is a verb and a noun. As a verb, notice means to pay attention to someone or to recognize someone. For example, if your friend got a haircut, you might say, oh, I noticed you got a haircut. That means you recognize that feature about somebody. As a noun, a notice is an announcement about an upcoming event. But be careful, notice does not mean to notify or to inform someone or to tell someone of something. SO on the slide means someone. It's my shorthand, okay? So it does not mean that you're telling somebody something. And this is how it is commonly misused. In fact, just a couple weeks ago at the place where I do workshops, one of my colleagues came into the course room and said, Brian, did the secretaries notice you about the changes in next week's schedule? And I looked at him and said, did they notice me? And he said, oh, did they notify you? Because even though, you know, he's Korean, he grew up in Korea, he went to America and he studied at a college, he got his degree, 4-year degree, undergraduate degree in America, and he knows that notice is Konglish. But of course he comes back to Korea, everybody around him is using notice instead of notify, so he falls into that bad habit again. And you know, we both laughed over that. But yet, like I said, I wish there was somebody in Korean who would correct my Korean so that I could, you know, remember and improve my Korean. Anyway, so be careful. Notice does not mean to notify somebody or to tell somebody. So this is incorrect. If you say, please notice me of any changes, that's incorrect usage. It should be, we will notify you of any changes, or please notify me of any changes. You could also say, please see the notice on the bulletin board. Now that's different, right? See is the verb, notice is a noun. So if there's a notice on a bulletin board or the wall of your office or something, that is a printed notice. It has information on it about perhaps an upcoming event or maybe emergency information as well. It doesn't have to be an upcoming event, but that is a notice. Also, you could say, I did not notice the new logo. In that case, what you're saying is that you didn't recognize or you didn't see the new logo. But of course, in these examples, it does not mean that you told somebody something. So why do many people use notice as a synonym for inform, notify, or tell? It might be because of the expression in English, give someone notice. If you give someone notice, you're telling them about something that's going to happen soon. But notice the verb is give, not notice. Notice is still a noun. If you give someone notice, give is your verb, notice is the noun. And there are a couple of common expressions using this. For example, please give us notice before the lease agreement expires. It's also very common, there's a common expression in English about 2 weeks notice. For example, you should give your employer 2 weeks notice before resigning. So if you give someone 2 weeks notice, that means that you're quitting your job. And in America, it's just customary to give your employer advance notice. That's another collocation using notice. Give your employer advance notice or 2 weeks notice before you leave the job. In those 2 weeks, the employer has enough time to find someone to replace you when you leave the company so that that position isn't vacant. And that's just common courtesy. Okay, so be careful. Do not use notice as a synonym for notify, inform, or tell. It does not mean to tell somebody. Okay. Moving on, we have expect versus look forward to. Now this is interesting because in English, expect means to regard something as likely to happen. Maybe you're making a prediction or you're saying what will happen in the future and you're pretty sure about it. Look forward to is to anticipate. It means that there's an event coming up that you are very positive about. You're happy about. You're anticipating it. To anticipate means to look forward to something. It means that you're eager or you're happy. You are pleased about or excited about something that is going to happen soon. Now be careful here. Expect, I notice some of my students say that expect is translated into Korean as gidehada. Be careful because gidehada has a positive meaning in Korean, but expect does not have a positive meaning. So we hear some strange expressions sometimes using expect. You can't translate gidehada as expect in all situations. Let me give you some examples. For example, if you say, we expect to meet you on the 24th, that doesn't necessarily have positive feelings. In fact, it could sound very direct, cold, it could be aggressive. If you receive an email from a colleague and they say, we expect to meet you on the 24th, you might think, they're expecting to meet me. Why? Is there a problem? Is there some issue we need to discuss? Another example, maybe you're going to a conference next month and you email your colleague in another company, another country, that you're going to that conference and you're wondering if they're going too. And they email you back and say, yes, I'm going. I expect to see you there. That means almost like they're demanding that they see you there. So be careful. That could carry the wrong impression. So you don't want to do that. It's much better to say, I'm looking forward to meeting you at the conference, or we're looking forward to meeting you on the 24th. That's friendly. That is excitement. It's not cold and aggressive and you're wondering, why are they expecting to meet me? Another type of sentence that I frequently hear is this: I am expecting my summer vacation. So sometimes my Korean colleagues might say, summer vacation is coming up soon, right? And I am expecting it. In Korean, I think you might say, 여름 여행 기대하다, right? So, but if you translate that to English as I am expecting my summer vacation, that sounds strange to a native speaker. Because if you say, I am expecting my summer vacation, the native speaker is thinking, well, what do you mean you're expecting it? You're expecting it to be long, good, expensive? What are you expecting? So it sounds unfinished if you just say, I'm expecting my summer vacation. It doesn't have the same nuance or meaning as I'm looking forward to my summer vacation, or I'm really looking forward to my summer vacation. You put really to show that you're really anticipating it, to emphasize that fact. So it's very common to say I'm looking forward to my vacation, but I'm expecting my vacation? That sounds unfinished. What are you expecting about it? So be careful between these two words. So you want to say, we look forward to meeting you on the 24th. That is friendly. That is anticipating. Now, don't misunderstand me. Of course, you can still use expect for different situations. You could, for example, say, we expect that our presentation will last 30 minutes. That's fine. You're just making a prediction about your presentation, and it is finished, right? You don't say, we expect our presentation, period. Expect what? But you can't say, we expect that our presentation will last 30 minutes. Fine, you're making a prediction about your presentation. We use expect as a way to make predictions about certain things. That's fine. We expect that we will be 30 minutes late, for example. Our plane has been delayed. We expect to miss the meeting. That's fine. You're just making a prediction about the future. So you can use expect, but just be careful about the situation and the context in which you use expect. Okay, great. Let's move on. Next is another interesting one, and that is find versus look for or search for. Now again, in Korean, some of these are because of translation problems. In Korean, you guys use 찾다 to describe that you're looking for something or that you found something. For example, let's say that I lose my keys. So 지금 찾아요. 지금, now I am looking for them. But you said 찾았어요, right? But then I find them. Oh, 여기 있어요. I found them. 여기 있어요. 찾았어요, right? You use the same verb. But in English, we use different verbs, different vocabulary for these different situations. So if you try to use the verb find before you know where something is, that sounds strange, as in this example. We are currently finding a new distributor for our products. That sounds strange. You're finding it. If you say you found something, it means you already found that person. How can you be finding something? Finding in this sentence sounds like it takes a long time. You're finding something? How can you find something for a long time? You found it. That just takes a second. We found it. You're done. You're not looking for it anymore. So you should change that to, we are looking for a new distributor for our products. Of course, you can also use search. We are searching for a new distributor for our products. But that does take a long time. So be careful. Before you know where the object is, before the object is found, you should say, we are looking for or we are searching for it. After the object is found, then you can say, we found it. Okay? But it sounds very strange in English to say, we are finding Momo. We are finding something, right? That sounds odd. So be careful with the meaning and how they are used. Okay, let's move on. Next, we have trip versus travel. These two words are also very commonly confused. Remember that in business contexts, trip is a noun, travel is a verb. In business contexts, we don't usually use trip as a verb. It sounds strange. For example, if you said, we will trip to Tokyo next week, that is incorrect. Now, to be honest, that sentence is possible, but it has a completely different meaning, and I'm sure it's not what you meant. Trip as a verb, and trip can be a verb, but trip as a verb means that you are walking and your foot maybe hits something to make you fall, and that is to trip. So if you say, we will trip to Tokyo next week, and you're in Seoul, well, that's going to hurt, right? Because you're going to fall and fall to Tokyo. That's a very long way to fall. It's a very long way to trip. So it sounds rather amusing or strange to say, we will trip to Tokyo. So you're not going to fall repeatedly to Tokyo and wind up in Tokyo as the result. Ouch, that's going to hurt, right? So it sounds very amusing to say that. So be careful, don't say that. Instead, we will take a trip to Tokyo. Now you can use trip as a noun. The verb is take. We will take a trip to Tokyo next week. We can also, of course, use have a trip. I have a trip coming up. So I have a trip coming up. You could also say that. Otherwise, just use travel as the verb. We will travel to Japan next week would be much better than we will trip to Japan. We will travel to Japan next week. So, of course, As we saw in the quiz we took at the beginning of Unit 2-1, the video of 2-1, I will trip, or I think it said Ms. Jones or Ms. Lee will trip to New York next week. Ouch! It's going to hurt, especially if she's in Seoul. She's halfway around the world. She's going to trip all that way. Ow, that's going to hurt. So please be careful between using trip and travel. Okay, moving on. Next is very common. I hear a lot of strange, awkward, and basically incorrect usages of recommend and suggest. And I think this gives English language learners, not just from Korea, but for all over the place, problems. And I've looked on many different internet websites and a lot of people asking about how to use these verbs correctly. There are three common constructions that these verbs are used correctly. The first one is, you can recommend doing something. Let me give you a situation. You have a business colleague coming to visit you in Seoul, in Korea, and they're coming from outside the country. They write an email to you. They would like to know where a good hotel is. Maybe they want to know a good hotel near your office because they don't want to commute a lot while they're here. Maybe they're here for a few days, maybe a week. So they might say, could you suggest or recommend a hotel to me? And you could write back, we suggest staying, doing, ing. We recommend staying at the Hilton Hotel. That's fine. So you can recommend somebody, you can recommend doing something. You don't have to say you. You wouldn't say, we recommend you staying. No, just we recommend staying at the Hilton Hotel. That's one way. Another way is that, yes, you can mention the person, but then it's advisable to use that. You don't have to use that, but it sounds better if you do. It's a little bit more formal too. So you could say, we recommend that you stay, in this case not ing, we recommend that you stay at the Hilton Hotel. So you recommend that someone do something. And of course you could also use suggest. We suggest that you stay at the Hilton Hotel. Now the last one is that you recommend something to someone. So following our example of which hotel to stay at, we could say, we recommend the Hilton Hotel to you. However, you notice I didn't put suggest because we wouldn't say that. We suggest the Hilton Hotel to you. That's a little bit strange. It sounds better when you're making a recommendation or a suggestion. Really, you're recommending something to someone. So you could recommend an object, a company, even a person to someone else. So you recommend something or someone to someone else. We recommend the Hilton Hotel for you. Or another example, I'm looking for a new department head. Oh, we recommend Mr. John Smith to you as a good candidate. Okay, so you recommend doing something, you recommend that someone do something, or you recommend something to someone. Those are the three common ways to use these words. So I hope they cover most situations. So be careful. We recommend you to stay at the Hightown Hotel. This is incorrect. A lot of non-native English speakers will use this though, not just in Korea, but I've noticed on the internet there's many questions about this. Most native speakers will regard this as incorrect. And yes, I know the Oxford Learner's Dictionary does list this as an example of usage, but to most native speakers, it does not sound quite correct. Maybe it's because of non-native English speakers using it so frequently, it's becoming accepted. But typically, when I hear something like this, I say, no, that doesn't sound right. So I would suggest that you do not use this construction. Okay. Instead, I would recommend that you say, we recommend that you stay at the Hightown Hotel, or we suggest that you stay at the Hightown Hotel. In this case, you could use either one, recommend or suggest. But we suggest you to, no, that's strange. I would not use that. We recommend, suggest you the Hightown Hotel. So be careful. In this case, you're recommending somebody something, you're missing a word. And in fact, we should switch the word order, right? So we should say, we recommend the Hightown Hotel to you. Now, you don't have to say to you, right? You could just say, well, we recommend the Hightown Hotel. You don't necessarily have to include to you at the end. It would be fine to not do it. If you're writing formally, maybe you would, but informally, there's no reason to do that. We recommend the Hightown Hotel, or I recommend Mr. John Smith. Fine, no problem. Now, continuing with this idea, I'd like to show you a couple more examples to give you a better idea of how to use these words. First, we suggest to postpone the meeting. This is incorrect. In fact, I recently received an email, very similar sentence construction to this, and immediately I thought, oh, no, that's not correct. So instead of saying we suggest to postpone the meeting, it would be better to write we suggest postponing the meeting, especially if you're not mentioning the person to whom you're making the recommendation, right? If you're just making a general recommendation or a general suggestion, it's very common to just use verb ing. Next, please recommend me a different service provider. I also see this construction very often, and it does not sound correct. It sounds much better if you say, please recommend a different service provider to me. Okay, so you recommend something to someone else. And if I'm asking for your advice, I'm asking for your recommendation, then I would say, please recommend something to me. And I hope you give me good advice. Okay, good. Okay, next. I will suggest about that. That is exactly what I got in an email actually a couple weeks ago. I suggested, or I made a proposal. I think we were changing the schedule, and I said I'm not available on Wednesday, but I am available on Friday. I emailed or texted, maybe it was a text message, I texted my contact that message, and so he wrote back to me and said, okay, I will suggest them about that. And I'm like, okay, that's not correct. So if I met him in person, I'd probably say something, but I'm not going to correct him over texting. But anyway, he should have said, I will suggest they do that, or I will recommend that to them. Don't say I will suggest about that, or I will suggest them about that. That is just incorrect. That just sounds completely wrong to a native speaker. Much better to say, I will suggest they do that, or I will recommend that to them, or I will suggest that to them. You could also say that. Okay, good. I know using recommend and suggest is difficult. I hear a lot of mistakes using these two words. I hope I covered everything. If there's something I haven't covered, go ahead and leave a comment or a question in the comment section below. Okay, great. Let's move on. Now, this next one is definitely what I would call Konglish. It used to be more common, though. I don't hear it so often nowadays. Sometimes, rarely, I do hear it. So let's go over it here. I am difficult, or I am hard to do something, or it is difficult, or it is hard to do something. Which is correct? Well, don't say I will be difficult to. That doesn't make sense. I will be difficult to finish the report by tomorrow. That is not correct. It should be it. It will be difficult for me. You don't have to include for me, to finish the report by tomorrow. So it will be difficult to finish the report by tomorrow. That is correct. You don't have to say for me. But it refers to the situation. You're talking about the action. That action is going to be difficult. It will be hard. But like I said, I don't hear this too much nowadays. Sometimes I hear it, but be careful. Don't say I am difficult or we are difficult to do something. Say it is difficult to do. Okay. Next, this is very common. Most of students, see, I just made a mistake, okay? Don't say most of students make this mistake. I should say most students make this mistake, or most of the students in my workshops make this mistake. Let's talk about this. First of all, you can say most companies outsource some services. That's okay, no problem. But if you say most of companies are concerned with customer service, that is incorrect. However, you can say most of the companies in the biotech industry have R&D departments. So as we can see, you can say most companies, you can say most of the companies, but don't write most of and then the noun or the subject of the sentence, because that is most often, I'm sure you can find an exception somewhere, but most of the time, 99% of the time, that is incorrect. And it's very common. I hear this all the time. So be careful. What's the difference? First of all, this could be like number 1, and this could be number 2, and this could be number 3. So number 1 and 3 are correct, but you'll notice sometimes I'm saying most, and sometimes I'm saying most of the. What's the difference between 1 and 3? In sentence 1, we're saying most companies, and we're just saying most companies outsource some services. In this sentence, which companies am I talking about? I'm not talking about any specific group of companies. I'm just speaking generally. It's a general reference. Most companies in the world, there's no specific reference in that sentence. But look at sentence number 3. Most of the companies in the biotech industry have R&D departments. Which companies am I talking about? That's right. I'm talking about the companies in the biotech industry. This is a specific reference. Specific. Sorry, this pen is a little bit odd to write with. Okay. So most of the companies in the biotech industry, that is a specific reference. So if you're making a specific reference, if you're talking about a group that you are specifying in some way, then you say most of the. But if you're speaking generally, just say most. But don't say most of, because that's just incorrect. Most of students, most of young people. No, this is incorrect. Okay, moving on. Many students ask me about prepositions. I know prepositions give people a headache, so I'm sorry about that. But when they're talking about prepositions concerning your workplace or your title, it's very common to say that you work at a company, in a department, on a team. Okay? Sometimes people get these confused. So you could say, I work at Alpha Company, in the marketing department, on an advertising team. Don't say he works in the research team. You don't work in a team, you work on a team. So normally we say he's on a team, or especially if you're talking about sports, you would say so-and-so is on this team. He plays, well, you could say he plays for this team. That's very common. But when you're talking about which team does he play for, you can say he's on such and such team. So you are on a team. You're not in a team. Don't say you work in Alpha Incorporated. That sounds kind of strange. You work in the company. No, you work at a company. It's kind of like we're referring to a location. There's no real explanation I can give to you as to why we use these. It's just common practice. It's just the standard evolution of the language. It's just how we describe these situations. You work at a company. You don't work in a company. You can say I work in sales. Now this is a little bit different. If you're describing the field in which you work, I work in sales, I work in computer programming, I work in information technology. If you're describing the field in which you work, sure, people will use in. I work in sales, I work in advertising, for example. You can also, as I said before, you can also use for all of these. I work for Alpha Company, for the marketing department, for an advertising team. Those are all correct. But usually we would say you work at a company, in a department, on a team. Okay, good. Now this is interesting too. Asking for a reply. I have 3 words here: revert, reply, and reply me. This is interesting because revert is actually not really Konglish. The first time I saw this was when one of my Korean students in a workshop came up to me during the break and said, "Excuse me, teacher, can you tell me what this means?" And he showed me on his phone an email, and at the bottom of the email it said something like, "Please revert soonest," or "Please revert by tomorrow." And he said, "I don't understand what this means, revert." And I looked at it and said, "Yeah, that's strange." And I noticed the name at the bottom of the email was David. So I said, "Is this an American?" And he said, "No, I received this email. David is he's an Indian business person from India, and he sent me this email. I thought, well, that's interesting. And then, of course, I looked it up on the internet, and I found that this is kind of common usage in South Asia, India, and of course, India has a great influence on Malaysia, on Singapore. So in the surrounding regions, many business people will say, please revert by tomorrow. But this is non-standard English, right? The native speakers look at that and say, revert, what? Revert means to change back into something that you were previously. For example, a caterpillar changes into a butterfly, but a butterfly does not revert back to a caterpillar. So that would cause some confusion for English speakers, native English speakers. So be careful with that one. And that's very interesting how, different regions might use English in non-standard ways, but it becomes like custom or tradition in that area. And that's also, I made that point at the beginning of the previous video that was titled Unit 2-1. If you do have any of these interesting regional uses of English that maybe aren't correct, please leave a comment down below. It's great discussion. I'd be happy to give my 2 cents on it and hopefully tell you what a native speaker would normally say. Okay, good. So, please revert tomorrow. That doesn't make sense. Then don't use that. Please revert tomorrow. That's incorrect. Please reply me tomorrow. Now, this is something that many Korean colleagues of mine will write to me in an email, or they'll write in a workshop. Please reply me. There's no reason to use a pronoun after, well, you can use a pronoun, but you need to use the preposition to. Don't just say, please reply me. You could say, please reply to me to make it grammatically correct, but not please reply me or please reply Ms. Kim. If you want somebody to reply to Ms. Kim, don't write please reply Ms. Kim, because that's not grammatically correct. However, I would suggest this is redundant. There's no reason to write this. Please reply back to me tomorrow. Reply just means to respond, to get back to you. It already has that meaning. So all of this is really redundant. There's no need to say that. I mean, grammatically it's fine, there's no problem, but it just sounds awfully redundant. So just say, please reply tomorrow. That's all you really need to say. So please reply tomorrow. If you want to emphasize that you reply to me, not my team mate or my coworker, right? Make sure you reply to me, not to Ms. Lee. That's fine. But if you're sending an email to somebody and it doesn't matter who they reply to, then you could say, please, I'll be out of the office tomorrow. Please reply to Ms. Lee. That's fine. Okay, but normally you don't really need to say to me. It's already implied in the idea of reply. So please reply tomorrow. Okay, good. Another interesting kind of Konglish that I've heard recently is the use of co-work or co-working. Don't use co-work in this way. We would like to do a co-work with your company. That's not correct. Or instead, you should say, we would like to do a joint project with your company. Or you could say, we would like to collaborate on a project with your company. Collaborate means that you will work together with someone. That's another way you could say it. We would like to work together with you. Not we would like to co-work with you. That is Konglish. That's not correct. We would like to co-work with you. No. Or we would like to do a co-work with you. No. We would like to work with you. You don't even have to say together. Just say we would like to work with you on this project. Or there is a project that we would like to work with you on. Okay. Another way you could say that is we would like to know if you are interested in working together on a project. Okay, so be careful. Don't say we would like to do a co-work or we would like to co-work with you. Those are not correct. Let's go over a little bit more of the incorrect sentences I hear using co-work as a verb. For example, I co-work with Mr. Lee. Sometimes I hear that. No, that's not correct. We don't say that. Instead, you should say, Mr. Lee is my co-worker, or I work with Mr. Lee, right? Or Mr. Lee and I work on the same team. We work in the same department. We work at the same company. So he is my co-worker. Oh, before I go on to the next one, sometimes people ask me, what is the difference between a coworker and a colleague? Well, a coworker is someone that you work with at the same company. So if you're talking about the people that you work at a company with, those are your coworkers. A colleague is a more broad definition or broad group of people. People who work in the same field as you are your colleagues. If you go to a conference or a symposium in Europe one year, you are going to that symposium probably with colleagues. These are people, professionals in your field from all over the world, from many different companies, but they work in the same field as you. So your coworkers are also your colleagues, but not all colleagues are your coworkers. I hope you understand. Coworkers are just your company. Colleagues are in your field, whether they work at your company or not. Okay, so that's the difference between coworker and colleague. So another correct sentence would be, Mr. Lee and I are working on this project together. Now, maybe Mr. Lee isn't your coworker. Maybe he's from another company. So you could say this, Mr. Lee and I are working on this project together. It doesn't have any implication about whether Mr. Lee is your coworker or your colleague. It doesn't mean that. He could be working at a different company, and this would be fine to say as well. So, common uses of co-working. Where did co-working come from? Well, it was a movement that started in San Francisco in 2005. And you can say that co-working is a movement. It's a trend. It's a style of working. It's a style of working where people share an office but work on independent projects, right? So if, it's kind of a new word. It's a new trend. It's a new habit or practice in business. And it's interesting how these words spread or evolve in English. Maybe we will be using co-working in a different way 10 years from now. Who knows? Depends on the technologies that are developed. Okay, so be careful between co-work and co-working. Please don't misuse these words. I hear these quite often. So, okay, good. Next, I hear a lot of mistakes with using be, the verb be. It's an auxiliary verb or helping verb. Don't say the conference will consist of. That's incorrect. There's no reason to use be here. Just say the conference will consist of, not be consist of. Sometimes I hear people or see people that will write this. You might remember her from a business conference in Singapore. There's no reason to use be here. Just say you might remember her from. However, sometimes you do need be. For example, I saw this in an email recently. I will pleased if you could. In this case, we do need be. I will be pleased because I will be pleased. In the future, I will be pleased, right? If you could meet me on Friday, for example. Okay, so be careful with using be. Next, I hear a lot of strange sentences using the word budget. For example, we have lack of budget, or there is lack of budget. There is not enough budget. That's very common. I hear that often. There is not enough budget to pay for that, or our company doesn't have enough budget. Basically, what is a budget? A budget is a plan to spend money. It doesn't mean money. It's not synonymous with money. So be careful. You should say there is not enough money in the budget to pay for this. If there's a project that you're considering, or maybe somebody's suggesting, hey, let's hire some more workers because we have a big project coming up, then you should say, don't say there's not enough budget to hire more people. Say there's not enough money in the budget to hire more people. You could also say our budget is very tight this year. That means there's not a lot of money in the budget. If your budget is really tight, you don't have a lot of extra money. So there's not a lot of extra money in the budget. Our budget is very tight. But don't say we have a loose budget. That's strange. Just say our budget is very tight. Or you could say our budget will not cover those expenses. I'm sorry, my budget, my company's budget will not cover first-class airplane tickets to the conference. Too bad. Okay. Our budget will not cover those expenses. In other words, there's not enough money in the budget to pay for those expenses. Okay, the next one, this is a huge topic, and I don't really want to make a 30-minute lesson about this, but many Korean students do have difficulties using articles correctly, article usage. And this corresponds to page 20. I do have a little bit more in-depth explanation on page 20 about article usage, a versus the versus not using a or the. Let's go over some basic rules for these articles. First of all, just remember that a, if you use the article a, it means one of many. There are many things that are similar to this. We have an office where we work. There are many offices. It's just one of many. It's a general reference. When you use a, you're just making a general reference to something. For example, we need to make a budget for next year. In that case, you're just speaking general, just any budget. However, you could also say we need to make the budget for next year, because then you're specifying it. It's the budget for next year. That makes it unique. Because when you're referring to you're saying there's only one of a thing. It's unique. For example, I live in a house. There are many houses, right? There's nothing specific about my sentence. I live in a house. There are many, many different houses in the world. But if I say the president, where does the president live? He lives in the White House, because there's only one White House that I'm referring to, and that of course there might be many White Houses, but when I say the president lives in the White House, I'm talking about the structure that stands at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C. That's the White House. There's only one. It's a specific reference. It means there's only one of these things. Of course, when you're mentioning something, like for example, I live in a house. Oh, I've been to your house. The house in which you live is very nice. When you refer back to it, of course, then I'm making a specific reference, because the house. I know the house, you know the house, then it becomes the house. Okay. Don't use an article before general ideas when the noun is plural or uncountable. For example, I hear many mistakes when people are talking, for example, about pollution. They might say, oh, the pollution is getting worse every year. Not the pollution, it's just pollution. Pollution is a general idea. It's non-countable, so we don't say the pollution. Same thing with crime. The crime is going down. No, crime is going down this year. So when you're talking about a general idea, pollution, crime, unemployment, when the noun is plural, uncountable, don't use an article in front of it. Let's go over some examples. First of all, we have Ms. Cho is out of office today. Now, this is something that I've been hearing fairly often recently. And I understand that out of office is an expression that people might use as an abbreviation, or maybe even as an adjective sometimes. For example, sometimes people might send an email and the subject line is just out of office this week. In other words, I'm out of office. But technically, if you're writing in a sentence, it should be I'm out of the office. It sounds strange to say Ms. Cho is out of office today. It sounds incomplete. Ms. Cho is out of the office today. Another example, please find attached the map to our office. Why is this strange? Because if I receive an email like that, somebody wrote, please find attached the map to our office. It's the map. It's the only map to our office. It's like, ooh, very precious. That of course, that sounds very strange, right? You should write, please find attached a map to our office. There are many possible maps to your office in all shapes, colors, designs. There's many different possible maps to your office. You didn't send me the only map in the world. No, you just send me a map, okay? So it sounds strange to say, please find attached the map to our office. You see, it sounds odd because the map is this very specific reference. Only one, it's unique. But no, there are many possible maps to your office. Next, Dennis sent us updated budget on October 21st. So what's the problem here? Well, the problem is there is no article at all. We need an article here. So Dennis sent us, now we could use a or the. Actually, we have to use an because a is a vowel sound. So Dennis sent us an updated budget on October 21st. So he sent us an updated budget, but there could be more than one budget. Budget, of course, is a plan to spend money. There may have been several different plans. But if you say Dennis sent us the updated budget, that's the one that maybe it's the latest one. That's the one that is accepted by everyone. If you send us an updated budget, that kind of has the implication that maybe there's a new budget. There's been changes to it. So if you So if you say that, Dennis sent us an updated budget, you're kind of implying that you're not sure if that's the final budget. Maybe there have been some changes to it. But if you say Dennis sent us the updated budget on October 21st, that's the final budget. That's the latest, most recent one. So it's interesting how, depending on the context, you will use a or the. A couple of more examples. Please kindly call officer and check the reason for delay. There's two problems here. First of all, please kindly call the officer, right, and check the reason for the delay. Now you could also use an, right? So if there's only one officer working at the company or in that department, then you say call the officer, because there's only one. But if there are many officers, then you could say, please kindly call an officer. This is interesting when people describe their job title. For example, I'm the head researcher at KCIS. That means there's only one person who has your title. You are the head researcher. But if you say I am a head researcher, that means there are many head researchers in your department. So again, depending on what you mean, use a or the for titles. And then check the reason for the delay. Obviously, this is in refer, and I'm sorry, my pen doesn't write very well. The delay. In other words, that sounds like a reference to something you talked about earlier, right? I'm writing an email to you and I'm complaining about a delay. You write back and say, please kindly call an officer and check the reason for the delay that you mentioned previously. Okay. Also, we would like to invite you to a 5th conference on cybersecurity. What is the issue here? The issue is a. We don't use a in front of what we call ordinal numbers. Ordinal numbers are first, second, third, fourth. Those numbers are what we call ordinal numbers. And when you're talking about the title of a conference, a symposium, an event, it's very common people will say the 5th, because it means probably the 5th annual conference on cybersecurity. It doesn't have to be annual. I mean, maybe it meets every 2 years, so maybe it's just the 5th, but it's the 5th. There's only one 5th conference on cybersecurity. It's unique, so we need to use the. Last, we have please send me a latest version of the report. This is very similar to what we just talked about. Latest means there's only one. It's the latest. So first, second, third, we use the for those ordinal numbers, but the latest version, right? Maybe we worked on 8 different versions of the report. The 8th version is the latest version. So it is the latest. Okay, so it's the latest. That makes it unique. It's unique because it is the latest. So we use the, not a. Okay, so go review just very quickly. Ms. Cho is out of the office today. Please find attached a map to our office. Dennis sent us the updated budget or an updated budget on October 21st, depending what the situation is. Please kindly call an officer and check the reason for the delay. In this case, an officer means there are many officers. If I changed it to please kindly call the officer, there's only one person who is the officer. We would like to invite you to the 5th conference on cybersecurity. So in front of ordinal numbers, use the. And please send me the latest version of the report. Okay, no, I know this is kind of quick, and there are so many different examples and so many different reasons to use a versus the versus nothing, but I hope this clears up some of the more common mistakes that I see that students are making when writing business emails. Okay, now it's time to review what we've gone over so far, and we have several sentences that may or may not have mistakes in them. I believe all of these sentences have mistakes, but there could be one mistake, there could be 2 mistakes. And of course, you can find these on page 22. You see the sentence and you have space underneath each to make notes or rewrite it as you see fit. Okay, so let's go over these together. The first one is, most of researchers at our company will attend the conference. So, are there any mistakes in this sentence? I hope you caught at least one mistake. Hopefully you saw this. That is incorrect. Why? Because it is a specific reference, right? You're making a specific reference. You're saying the researchers at our company. And I just gave you the answer, right? Most of the researchers. So when you're making a specific reference to a group and you're grouping them somehow, researchers at our company, that makes a specific reference. So we need to use the. Don't just say most of researchers. It should be most of the researchers at our company. And yes, I realize that many of these mistakes are very small or minor, but again, many students are interested in perfecting their English. They want to know about these little details so that they can improve their English maybe to the next level. And I appreciate your enthusiasm, and I hope this is helping you. Number 2, we are currently finding a qualified candidate for the position. What, if any, mistake can you find in this sentence? Remember when we talked about the Korean verb 찾다, right? And right there, finding. We don't use finding before you have found something. It doesn't really make sense. It should be, we are currently looking for a qualified candidate for the position. After you found the qualified candidate, then you can say find. You can say we found him. But we are finding, that doesn't sound correct. It's better to say we are currently looking for or searching for a qualified candidate for the position. Number 3, we are lack of budget to hire another employee. So we are lack of budget. So in this sentence, do you see any problems? Probably remember what we talked about when we discussed budget, right? We are lack of budget. That is just incorrect. However, unfortunately, I do hear this often. We should change that to there is not enough money in the budget to hire another employee. Now, of course, there are many different ways you could correct this. You could say, our budget is too tight to hire another employee. Our budget won't cover the expenses of hiring a new employee. So there are different ways. This is just one of many ways to fix that. But don't say we are lack of budget. That doesn't really make sense. Number 4, could you recommend me a hotel? Any mistakes? This sounds strange. It should be, switch it around. Could you recommend a hotel to me? Or just could you recommend a hotel? You don't really need to say to me. So could you recommend a hotel? Moving on, number 5, Mr. Park is out of office next month to attend 4th Annual Conference on Environmental Protection. What do you guys think? Did you catch 2 mistakes? There are 2 mistakes. The first one, of course, is out of office. We should say out of the office. And attend 4th, we need an article here. So again, it should be the. So it should look like this. Mr. Park is out of the office, Mr. Park is out of the office next month to attend the 4th Annual Conference on Environmental Protection. So we need to add these 2 thes. So he's out of the office and the 4th Annual Conference on Environmental Protection. Last one, 6. I will revert back to your email by early next week. What do you guys think? This is actually kind of silly, right? How can you revert back to an email? You are a person. You are a human being. You never were an email, so how could you revert back to an email? Doesn't sound correct. So instead, we should write, I will reply to your email early next week, right? You're giving somebody a deadline. You're telling them, I don't have a lot of time right now. I'm very busy, but I will reply to your email early next week. I will reply to your concerns early next week. Okay, very good. Okay, great job, everybody. Again, like I said, a lot of these mistakes, some of them are minor. Some of them, however, especially when we're talking about vocabulary switching or using the wrong word for the situation, could lead to some amusing or confusing situations. So be careful about the vocabulary that you are using. I hope this lesson was useful for you, and I hope it helped you maybe identify perhaps some mistakes that you are making, and now you know why those are mistakes, and you know how to correct them for the future. So thank you very much for studying with me, as always. In the next video lesson, we're going to go over awkward expressions, things that are not technically incorrect, but just sound awkward to a native speaker. So be sure to check that out. Anyway, take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
you.